Okay, everybody. Seatbelts should be fastened for this particular week coming up because there is, as I was indicating before, the cycles within cycles. There's a lot of interacting cycles that are at play as we do the dance into this week. Right off the bat, before we get into that, I had a dream that I woke up to yesterday morning. And what I was shown is that as an astrologer, the utilization of the celestial or planetary signatures in play is kind of like a weaver, because the interplay of these different energetic signatures that each particular planetary represents it's like threads in a fabric that is being woven and being able to tune into, if you will, any one of these particular energies and bring an aspect of it into the matrix of the fabric of creation that is today an unfolding process, is the stitching together of the potential for a new kind of fabric that hasn't been here before. And I would just right off the bat like to invite you into that perspective that is where I'm coming from as an astrologer, to allow you to see what particular threads of this interweaving process are speaking to you to participate in ways that maybe you hadn't anticipated or maybe didn't even realize was a possibility. And in that, it's that kind of container or avenue that I'm inviting you to dance into this week. And as I indicated right to begin with, there's a lot of planetary interweaving that's taking place this week. Let me just read through them really quickly, and this is just the ones that jumped out in my word. Mercury sextiles Neptune on Monday. Tuesday, Mars enters Taurus. Venus enters Cancer. Mercury forms a trine with Pluto. We come to Wednesday, the 20th. The Sun enters Gemini. We go to the 21st. Venus squares Neptune. We go to the 22nd. The Sun conjuncts Uranus, and Mercury sextiles Saturn. And, as part of the overall package of this is that on the 17th, the moon went out of bounds. And when the moon's out of bounds, our sensing capacities, how we feel about things, is not as, potentially reliable as we might be inclined to want our sensibilities to be. Now, let's unpack some of those threads of fabric that are trying to stitch themselves together for us to, discover this week. Right off the bat, let's get the chart up here. Okay. Mercury, this Monday. Mercury, well, we're in a mercurial cycle right now because Mercury's in Gemini, the sign that it rules. And so, who are our mercurial characters? They are messengers, storytellers, tricksters. There's sort of an intellectual quality to it, like eternal youth, shape-shifting. These are all mercurial aspects. The teacher, the conversationalist. What is the weave of Mercury at the very beginning of this week in forming that sextile with Neptune? Who is Neptune in Aries? Neptune, well, it's in Aries, so it's not likely to be of the nature to want to, just meander in the background, so to speak, and in a way that it's not participating. No, Aries means I want to participate. But it's Neptune. Is there a level of creativity, creative imagination in there? Yeah, that's one of Neptune's functions. But at the same time, illusion can be thrown into this equation as well, because that is part of the Neptunian story. Creative imagination that may step across the line of what is real and what isn't real. In sextile, a harmonious aspect between Mercury and Neptune. You can feel the potential. Mercury wants, it wants to say something. Its thinking capacities are firing on all cylinders. It's in its own sign. And yet at the same time, is my vision, my perception of what is capable of being accomplished real or not? Do you sense the potential for the trickster to show up into this equation? That Castor and Pollux doing a tug of war as to what's real and what's not real, and how real or how not real is it in this, teeter-totter, push me, pull you, tug of war kind of energy vying for our attention. Because, not so very far away was that Mercury going over Uranus. There at the very beginning of Gemini. What shall we call? Picture, if you will, a cauldron, percolating, bubbling away like crazy. That could be the Uranus factor at play right here. Things are coming up. You can feel the bubbles of inspiration lifting from the surface with something new just appeared. Something else new just appeared. This is Uranus at work, trying to, stir the pot efficiently or effectively enough to create new energies that we haven't participated in before, to, shake us out of our stupor or, state of sleep where we're really not paying attention to the potential of the things going on around us, to awaken us to a new moment. And Mercury, is it the trickster? Is it a knowledge that we can count on? That is for each of you to actually understand. Okay, Monday. That's Monday. And remember, our moon traveling through Gemini is out of bounds. On the 19th, Mars, it just went into Taurus. Venus, it just went into Cancer. Mars. Picture, if you will. Let's say, I'm just, off the top of my head, I'm picturing a knight riding his horse into a joust with another knight. Lances laid down in a very specific fashion. Can you feel that Martian energy? I need to win in this competition. That's Mars. Mars just stepped into Taurus. Taurus is like, kind of like an antithesis of that Aryan Mars energy that says, what's going on here? How might there be the potential for some level of harmonious getting together, Taurus, in a way that we can actually enhance the process of what it is that we came together to accomplish, and that picture is kind of like, poof, there goes those knights in shining armor riding on their gallant steeds, lances ready to strike each other down. But why? Mars is not exactly in its, strong suit when it goes into Taurus. It's in its detriment, low energy. It's not firing necessarily on all cylinders. It's still Mars. There's still, a percolating kind of energy that wants to, strike out. But in Taurus, perhaps not as vigilant as it might be where it just came from, Aries. Venus, the ruler of Taurus, a certain harmonic energy, harmony in play always when Venus is involved. Just stepped out of Gemini where, that percolating cauldron of options that really have no end is, at work across the line into Cancer. It wants, as Venus, to feel at home. It wants home to be a harmonious place where things and people and experiences can get along with one another in such fashion that, what will transpire in any container will be an expansion of an evolutionary process that invites participation with one another in a way that we will actually be able to understand each other more effectively. Venus going into Cancer. And on this same day, our mercurial factor, we're in Gemini. Well, we're almost about to be in Gemini, I should say. It's coming. That's the sun about to also enter Gemini this week. But Mercury, it is already in Gemini. Mercury, on this very same day, Tuesday, a Mars day, moves into a trine with Pluto up there in Aquarius. A trine is a aspect that, the energies flow very freely. These are two air signs. And so the mental capacities, the intellectual, the thinking range of interaction with one another is being stimulated. From a Mercurial and Gemini things, there's a curiosity. What is this about? Pluto and Aquarius. What is Pluto's purpose? Well, we already know, I've talked about this, for years. Pluto's function of being able to expose us to things that have been hidden from us, by bringing up things from the underworld that, we may not be entirely aware of. But why? Why does Pluto do that? There's a purpose to Pluto's function there. Pluto wants to make the soul aware or conscious of itself. Those hidden aspects that are being, shown to us. Likely, from a soul perspective, are there to awaken us, awaken our soul to aspects of our being that are vital to soul growth. And to keep them hidden is let's call it a manipulated control function of something in the human realm, this horizontal plane that is trying to keep us, well, I was going to say calm, but I'm not entirely sure that's the right term. Keep us, stuck in our ways, fixed on a certain set of principles, rules, and regulations that say, don't go out of line, don't raise your hand, don't stir the pot too vigorously, because if you do, we won't be able to control it. Well, I can sense in that a certain Aquarian kind of nature at work, because Aquarius it's the realm of the collective. And Pluto being in there, asking our souls to awaken to aspects of what the collective could, should, or would be about if we were soul awake enough to be able to recognize what it is that we really came to accomplish in this particular incarnational dance we are about. And Mercury and Pluto in this trine right now, the curiosity realm, it wants answers, I'm asking questions. I, as a soul, I want to recognize, why is it that there is so much distrust and discomfort and factors that are, trying to engage all of us into constant conflict with one another, when that really has very little value in the long range development of what it means to be spirit and a soul. Wednesday, here's our sun, 29 degrees, 39 minutes of Taurus. On this day, it's going to change hats. It's stepping out of Taurus, where, the potential for comfort and our ability to recognize a material level of existence, into Gemini, where, it's not all about the experiences of seeking comfort, but a curiosity level is being, energized. So on this day, the hat change, the sun going into the sign where curiosity is right there at the top of the pile. What is the experience of interaction potential that is going to awaken a moment when the question that we ask ourselves and each other is not what we expected? And I'm throwing that in quite specifically because of the presence of Uranus. Right off the bat, the sun comes into to Gemini and is holding hands with Uranus. Oh, who is our Uranian player in this signature? What thread from the celestial thing is coming down and saying, I want to participate in this dance in a way that you may not have expected was going to be the case. This is Uranus. I didn't come as Uranus to, present a well thought out, planned, pre planned version of what is going to transpire. Oh, no, no, not. As Uranus, I came to shake, rattle that cage of the life experience that you are participating in Gemini, with a question, maybe a series of questions that you did not anticipate. The sun, that vital core reality of who we are coming into contact with Uranus, sets in motion versions of, sun, leadership, rattle the cage. Can you sense that at work on the global level right now, where there are factors afoot that do need their cages rattled because, what the path that we have been shown as being the way we need to go may not be entirely above board. There are factors going on underneath the surface. This Uranian curiosity, there's Mercury. Mercury's still, in that mix. The sun, that it wants to wake up to a version that hasn't been tried before, likely. And our curiosity factor, sun going into Gemini, and Mercury being in Gemini, might be asking us some questions now that the answers have not been pre-planned, pre-formatted in a fashion that we could have predicted. Welcome to the land of Gemini. Oh yes, that trickster, he's definitely on board. So pay attention. And oops, back one day. On Thursday, Venus, 3 degrees of Cancer, forms a square with Neptune. And we already gave you some indication of some potential Neptunian versions. Well, that Venus square, and a square aspect is, picture, if you will, two things. A block of wood on ice, sliding along. Venus in a square to a planet is more like that block of wood on a piece of sandpaper. It doesn't slide. Mind you, it doesn't slide, but if one can apply enough energy to that experience, enough of that rubbing of that block of wood on sandpaper will eventually smooth the block of wood, and sliding will be facilitated. Well, that's what this square between Venus and Neptune is attempting. The Neptune, not necessarily too overt in the illusory function, but more in the creative imaginarian side, is saying, work at it. You can kind of picture that teeter-totter go back and forth, or that block of wood sliding back and forth on that sandpaper, getting smoother and smoother. You know, because just because it's a hard aspect, a square, doesn't necessarily mean that it shouldn't be there. It's there for a reason to, if we're willing to work at it. I was going to say allow, but that doesn't really generate a square kind of energy. You have to work at it. But the working at it is there to awaken us to why it's transpiring. There's an aspect of any kind of a square aspect that is there for a reason to wake us up to something we probably weren't awake to before. Happy block of wood once it's sanded smooth. Okay. Friday the 22nd. What do I have down here? Oh, let's see. Oh yeah, that's when Uranus and the Sun are they're right in each other's pockets, and you get that all kinds of dynamic energy at work. Who is Uranus? It's a planet of rebellion. That creative urge to strike out and say, I don't believe in what it is that you're trying to tell me, and therefore I'm going to rebel. I'm going to, challenge what it is that you're saying. Can you feel the Uranian factor in there? I came to wake you up. Are you paying attention, or are you, quagmired in a plodding kind of path that you're tired of? You don't know why you're doing it. And Uranus is saying, I haven't got time for that. I'm going to rattle this cage. I'm going to ask you a question, Mercury, Gemini, that the answers are not going to be as readily available as you could be used to, but they're pertinent questions. The answers, this is something that you have to work at. And who are we asking? The Sun. What leadership factor needs to be questioned very dynamically at the current moment? Fill in that blank for yourself. I don't want to get political on this. Another thing to keep in mind always when Uranus is in the mix is there's a sudden nature to what Uranus inspires. It's not something that you necessarily can plan for. There's a rumbling, kind of almost beneath the surface, that suddenly pops up. And you go, where did that come from? Why is it that is here right now? And a little small voice in the back of your consciousness is saying, wake up. You're not paying attention to what's going on. Are you awake? Because all of a sudden something just showed up that I hadn't anticipated. And it was, dynamic and sudden in the moment. This is Friday of this coming week. Oh, we've got all these plans for Memorial Day weekend. Staying away from the political side of what's going on, because there are, I don't even want to go there. But this is a unique weekend in the energy signature here in the United States. Memorial Day is a day to honor our fallen heroes. There's an irony to wanting to raise up. Oh boy. Raise up the souls of the dead with a thank you for their participation in war. The whole scenario of humans killing one another. From the memorial perspective, the thank you is for the saving of an ideology that was at odds with someone else's ideology. That was so adamantly opposed to each other that they could only envision a technique of killing one another to eradicate their perspectives rather than, hey, we're in Gemini now, having meaningful conversations to get at the root of why those animosities exist in the first place. This is not a minor consideration I'm bringing up here. This has ramifications for the development of a potential harmonious human culture that we could potentially envision going forward, where there's our reasons way beyond the material collective version of consumerism as the only meaningful reason for being alive. And in that, the support, not of the general consumering public, but of a small conglomerate of high-end business professionals raking in money hand over fist off of selling us this, that, and the other thing as being the reason why you are alive. And not inviting the ramifications of where do all those consumer goods come from? What is the cost to other humans in this process? What is the cost to Mother Earth of that level of consumption that doesn't recognize that we only have this one planet available resource-wise to draw from? And can it continue to support that level of rape, pillaging, plundering of the resources of this that is under our feet in each moment? I saw a interesting consideration the other day that was talking about water. We, as humanity, do not respect what it is that water represents. 70% of our makeup is water. And, the planet, we our surface water. We dump shit into our our rivers all the time as part of this consumer dance that we're stuck in that is not good. But more uniquely is the aquifers that are under our feet are being have huge straws plunged into them, and we're sucking this water out of the ground all around the planet at such a rate that it's affecting the geometry, the geometric construction of the Earth, the balances of leaving hollow spaces in the planet that used to be there filled with water to support in a very unique planetary fashion this planet that we live on. We don't know what the long-term symptoms that that's going to bring about are, but we are living into it at a rapidly increasing rate. On this day as well, Mercury down here, our trickster down there dancing in Gemini, forms a sextile with Saturn. Questions could arise. This is a harmonious aspect, but questions could arise. After all, it is Mercury. What, from a Saturn perspective, are the rules that we need to pay attention to? Are they the ones that have been drilled into us since we were knee-high to a grasshopper, saying that you must follow these set of rules and regulations in order for survival to transpire effectively? Or maybe it's time for a rewrite of the rules. After all, the Sun and Uranus, they're still holding hands. They're close together. It's kind of like, hey, maybe a little bit of shake and rattle and roll in here as far as what these rules signify is required. And Mercury's going to ask the questions. It's going to ask Saturn, sitting over there working its way through Aries, with a drive. Aries is a drive. And Saturn wants to make sure that those rules and those regulations, the form and structure of a situation, does not get disrupted too much. Are you sure that maybe perhaps some disruption is required right now? This is Friday of this week coming up. Can you feel that energy going into Memorial Day weekend thing? Do you feel comfortable celebrating the effects of a war-oriented human cultural paradigm? There are options. Hard to see right now as, some people refer to it as our administration. But recently I heard the term our regime, and that seems a little more poignant as far as the, respect that regime deserves for what it is attempting to accomplish all over this planet with other regimes that are, at odds with one another. Over what? Over ideologies? Over resources? Over just the fact that of an unwillingness to pay attention to the soul each of us has within us, seeking a spiritual package within which cooperation has so much more value than competition. Sunday comes along, first quarter moon, crisis in action. Do you have the capacity to perceive that some of the actions perpetrated currently on our planet at this first quarter moon crisis in action are not in our benefit on so many levels? Okay, that's all I'm going to give you for this week. There's a lot to ponder in this, and these are not minor considerations. There are energy factors in play that each of us needs to ask ourselves and each other if we are willingly participating in something that will enhance our ability to continue as a meaningful species on the planet or not. That's all I got for this week. It's a lot to ponder, I know, but it's something I think utilizing our Gemini cycle that we're in to consider and consider and consider again.